So we're going to switch from that to something that bothers me a bit, I'm seeing right now. And frankly, it's something that's been going on for a long, long time. It precedes me by a good deal of years. And that is politicians wielding faith as a tool for getting votes. I'm disturbed by pastors who back candidates who stoke the flames of fear and pridefulness, by churches who promote candidates as modern-day messiahs. We've been exploring the Hebrew Bible and many of its themes. And today we're going to deal with one that is often overlooked, but I think is critically important. The rejection of God in favor of tyrants. Now, we find ourselves today at the end of the period of the judges. And if some of you are like, I don't remember us talking about the judges, you're right, we've not talked about them so far. What we talked about last, before this particular message, was the saving of the nation of Israel from Pharaoh and Egypt. So the time of Judges is this in-between periods. And in this, so the story goes, keep in mind, our history accounts in the Bible there are stories with a point. They're not pure facts, okay? If we can try to understand where the author's coming from, instead of trying to make everything like legitimized as modern day history, we're going to be in a much better place. All right, so according to our writer in this particular account, 1 Samuel, that our passage was just read in, the time of the judges was a time when God was king. And according to our writer, this is good. Our writer has the perspective of the book of Deuteronomy in mind. The book of Deuteronomy talks about the law, the Torah. This is the way you should live so that you have harmony with God and harmony with your fellow neighbor. This is what it looks like to love God and love neighbor. Now, I have a lot of problems with the book of Deuteronomy, and I have problems with 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings, but there's also a lot of beauty to be had here. And in order to get to the beauty, we have to look at the point our writer's trying to make. One of them is, hey guys, if we would have done what Deuteronomy said, we would have been living into God's dream. Wouldn't that have been awesome? And instead, we keep throwing it away. We don't want this dream. We want something else. And every time we try something else, it turns out disastrously. So the vision is God's dream of peace and trust, of God and one another. It's also a dream of greater equity compared to the other nations around them. It's not perfect equity. I'm not even sure a writer is thinking in equitable terminology, but he's got this concern of, hey, you know what's great about the judges? We don't have kings. You know what's great about not having kings? We don't have dynasties. You know what's great about not having dynasties? We don't have aristocracy. We have normal, everyday folks who are pulled up for leadership, and when they are done, they're done. They go back to just being normal, everyday folks. That's the vision that our writer's talking about. And then in our story, the everyday people in Samuel's day say, you know what, Samuel? You're getting old, man. You've been a great judge, but we don't trust the people who are coming after you. You see, the problem with this system? The problem with this system is it's so unpredictable. It's too wild. It gets crazy. Okay, so everything works out great when we live in harmony with one another and we live in harmony with God. Okay, cool. That's great. But it works out horribly every once in a while. Like, it just goes disastrously wrong, Samuel. What we want is a king, like all these other nations. And their desire for a king comes out of this desire for safety. I get that, right? But put another way, it also comes out of this deep and immense fear. It is a fear-driven decision. And it's also one provoked by this immense insecurity. Not just like, hey, we worry about our own political safety type of insecurity, but actual like self-perception insecurity. Those other nations, you know what word we could use to describe them? Great. We want to make Israel great. This is the problem. This desire for a king comes out of a desire for greatness and out of a tremendous sense of fear. It's funny how that just keeps popping up, right? So Samuel, he reports to God. He tells God about this. And you know what God says? Hey, Samuel, you're taking this really personally. All right, calm down, champ. This isn't about you. They're rejecting me, not you, Samuel. So let them have this. Let them have it. Samuel goes to the people and he says, you guys, are you sure this is what you want? This sounds an awful lot like what we left in Egypt, as the story goes, right? This sounds a lot like Pharaoh. If you choose for yourself to have a king, do you know what's going to happen? That king is going to take your sons and use them to build his war machine, to build up his military. He will use their lives out in battle for wars that he wages. If you choose for yourself a king, he will take your children and use them out in the fields to grow food for himself. He will take your daughters and he will put them to work in his palace to take care of his household and that of his officials. If you choose for yourself a king, you are going to be oppressed. The king will take your property and distribute it to his court officials however he wants. Is this what you want? And the people, responding out of fear, responding out of a desire for greatness, respond, yes. Yes, that's exactly what we want. The first king they get is named Saul. And Saul looks the part of king. He's tall, he's like heads and shoulders above everybody else, which picture somebody who's like as tall as Jesse next to somebody who's like as tall as me. Like Jesse, you'd stand out in a lineup next to me, right? So he's like Jesse height, and he's strong, he's handsome. When God is like helping Samuel find the king, and Saul knows that his number is about to be called, he goes and he hides. He doesn't want this. And if you've ever read like a good king story, this is always a great sign, isn't it? The guy who should be king, he's like, I don't want this, right? I feel a connection there. Like, oh, this is who you want in charge, right? So Saul, he gets anointed. That means he gets covered in oil. This was a sign used to show that God has chosen this person God is present with this person in a special degree. We get our word for Messiah, and in the Greek, Christ, from this act. And so we see this connection, don't we, between kings and Jesus? Saul is supposed to be a savior king. But Samuel has already told us what to expect, hasn't he? So things start off great. But as great and as promising as Saul is, there's a problem. He is immensely prone to fits of rage and aggression. And he has incredible insecurity. He's a great leader unless you happen to be somebody more popular than him. Can somebody help me out with that door? I want the kids to be able to make noise without us worrying about it. He's a great leader unless you've won more battles than him. Unless the people sing songs about how handsome you are instead of him, well, then you're going to be on the run, like David. This is where we get the character King David from, but he's not king yet. He is a rival to Saul. Things go awry for Saul. He ends up dying. And in his place, we get King David, a proven military leader and a hero, about as heroic as heroes get. If you're thinking King Arthur and King David, I mean, they really are filling a similar purpose in their respective legends and histories. He is a mighty man. He is the best case scenario for what a king could be. He expands the borders and he strengthens them, he fortifies them. He starts the process of, getting a nice place for God to hang out in. He's not able to build a temple for God just yet, but he gets the land for it. He is the king that all other kings will be judged by in 1st and 2nd Kings. And he's even referred to as a man after God's own heart. And even he is not above putting his desires before everybody else. He kills to get what he wants. He rapes without consequence, he thinks, until he's called out on it. He uses and he abuses the people, and he even uses the same tactics as Pharaoh by building up the war machine. And all of that stuff that Samuel warned us about, David's starting us on that journey. And he's the best case scenario. He's the best that they can do. After him, you get the wisest man who's ever lived, Solomon. But he only comes to power after a very messy civil war caused by David's kids. We're starting to see things fall apart here. In this world where we want kings out of fear and out of a sense of self-aggrandizement, the desire to be great, to be important compared to everybody else, things start being undone around them. But Solomon is the wisest man to ever live, we're told. So surely things are going to work out better for him, right? I mean, isn't that what we look for when it comes to the candidates that we're seeking to elect? We're looking for the wisest of the wise. So he's going to be a great fit. And wouldn't you know it, his rule is very successful. He builds this beautiful palace. He builds a temple for God, a house for God to hang out in, one that everybody could look at and say, we can take heart and know that God is with us. Look at the temple. It is said that he makes the nation so prosperous that silver and gold line the steps. And yet, the people are crushed in his rule. And as he makes all of these political alliances and compromises with the nations around them, they do indeed become greatly lauded. People do think, wow, this guy is fantastic, and look how impressive Israel is. And the everyday person is functioning like a slave to him because he so heavily crushed them with taxes to make all of these projects work. And he and David, they're the best. Everything else is downhill from here. So even though 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings are supposed to be these stories about the monarchy that Israel has, it's ultimately the origin story for how Israel and then Judah end up swallowed up by the empire of Assyria and Babylon. We've sought to make ourselves this great and mighty nation, only to be divided up and swallowed up by greater and mightier nations. The point of all of this is simply this: compromised values out of fear and greatness lead to oppressive kings. Whenever we function and we choose for ourselves leaders who promise us that we will have nothing to be scared of with them, or they will alleviate our fears, or they're on our side because they're going to make us great and we could be haughty and prideful, we need to take note of that. We need to take note of that. And this isn't aimed at any particular political candidate. This isn't aimed at a specific station even. This is just what came up and where we are in the story. This is a theme in the Hebrew Bible, and it becomes a theme in the New Testament that gets expounded on. And it is a trap that our faith leaders have fallen into so many times. It makes me sad that we don't tell this story, because I think we lose sight of all of the compromises we make to pick the leaders that feel good to us. The ones who will say, hey, Christians, you're going to have it really great with us, you know? This has always been what's derailed the dream of God. This is what has led pastors and priests and popes again and again and again to pick rulers who claim Jesus but act nothing like him. This has caused churches to back tyrants as long as they claim to be on their side. Yeah, they're a bully, but they're our bully, right? Emperor Constantine, Mussolini, Hitler, Putin, and so many other tyrants throughout history. But along the way, there have also been those who have defied such strong men. Those who, at great personal cost, have preached about a son of David who would not oppress his people. A king who represented God in their midst while embracing his fellow humans not as slaves or as subjects, but as friends and siblings. A Jesus who was anointed not with oil, but with God's Spirit, and who shared such divine anointing with those who seek it. It is a shame we don't talk about this theme in the Hebrew Bible, because we lose sight of how beautiful and how radical the Jesus we follow happens to be. And we lose sight of this dream of God, this dream that Jesus is constantly pointing us back to in the Gospels. I was asked this last week by a couple of different people how I view Jesus. How do I make sense of Jesus? And simply put, this is it. This is how I see Jesus. Jesus points us to the dream of God, of a community that lives out love and justice and harmony with one another and with God, without fear of others and without self-centered greatness, without the tactics of oppressors, without violence, without fear and hate-mongering. This is a dream that I believe to my very core, and it is a dream that we are constantly whisked away into our own wildernesses and tempted to reject. But I, my friends, I'm so grateful that I'm a part of a community that also seeks to live into this dream. I'm grateful for all of you, and I am grateful for our neighbors that we can share this dream with, if not by word, then by action.